frozen to death, burned to death, gassed to death and tortured in the most unimaginable ways. In short, the North Korean people are the most persecuted on earth. Just because this terrible situation has persisted for so long, over 3 generations, cannot be a reason for the international community not to address it as a priority. Millions live at or near starvation, whilst international charities say food aid, if accompanied, and there are the means, will reach them. What more will our government, through DFID and otherwise, do to help them? Food should never be used as a weapon of war. And given that a major weapon in ending Stalin's reign of terror was the role which this country played in broadcasting BBC World Service and breaking the Soviet and, more recently, the Burmese information blockade, and given the Foreign Secretary's role in setting the strategic objectives of the World Service, will the Minister now consider extending BBC World Service to the Korean Peninsula? And having read Amnesty's recent report on the expansion of North Korean prison camps, incarcerating some 300,000 people, and following the recent spate of executions, including that of Chang Song-taek, the show trials, the force-fed propaganda, an ideology which has starved 2 million to death, and bearing in mind that the UK is now home for the largest number of North Korean refugees outside South Korea, shouldn't we do all in our power, both as a country and as a leader in the international community, to help end North Korea's reign of terror?
Minister of State, Mr.
My honourable friend's almost fantastical description of North Korea is, alas, not fantastical, it's only too true. To call it an Orwellian nightmare would be both a cliché and would not, I think, give a clear enough indication of the horrors vested on the people of that country by its leaders. I do think that the United Kingdom is playing an important part. The Honourable Lady will be aware that we are fully supportive of the United Nations Human Rights Council agreement to establish a commission of inquiry. This was a unanimous vote, which is unusual actually on these issues, and it was proposed in a resolution presented by the EU and Japan and co-sponsored more than 40 countries. As she knows, it will look at all these issues, particularly the prison camps, amongst other things, and other human rights abuses, and will report back in March 2014. The Honourable Lady asked specifically about food aid to North Korea, and understandably so, because reports emanating from that country about food shortages and even some alarmist reports about how people are going about eating are again too horrific to recount. The United Kingdom does not actually have a bilateral development programme currently in North Korea, nor do we provide money to international organisations specifically for use in North Korea, although some of the unearmarked funds we provide to organisations such as the World Food Programme may be used for their humanitarian programmes in the country. Our embassy in Pyongyang actually uses some of its bilateral funding for small-scale humanitarian programmes such as nutrition for nursing mothers and greenhouses for children's homes, but this remains under regular review. The Honourable Lady also asked about the ongoing issue of BBC and broadcasting into North Korea. I know this is something that her group has discussed. I know this is something very close to Lord Alton, my honourable friend Lord Alton of Liverpool, who's been pushing this very hard. And the BBC have been in touch with the FCO on this matter, or I should say vice versa. It is primarily an issue for the BBC, which has, of course, full editorial, operational and managerial independence. And we understand that they are not currently persuaded that a Korean language service would be an effective value for money use of available sources. That having been said, our embassy in Pyongyang is working with BBC Worldwide on an initiative to broadcast BBC drama, nature and science programmes on North Korean television. This has the potential, we believe, to expose significant numbers of North Koreans to aspects of the world, of the outside world, from which they are, of course, normally totally isolated.
Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for his response and the Honourable Member for Congleton for raising this issue. This House is, of course, united in its condemnation of the North Korean regime, and we share the Foreign Office's view that this execution is another shocking illustration of the brutality of the North Korean leadership. We also echo the concerns that have been expressed about the shocking levels of poverty and hunger in North Korea, as well as the many, many human rights abuses. It seems likely that the execution was intended as a show of strength by Kim Jong-un. To the wider world, it has also been taken as an indication of his insecurity and his volatility, and this is after a year which has seen an even more provocative and unpredictable stance from Pyongyang, including nuclear threats to the USA and the declaration of a state of war with South Korea. And recent satellite images published by Amnesty International indicate that the largest prison camps are continuing to expand. The international community responded calmly and crucially with a united front to the attempts to escalate tensions earlier this year, and it is important that this consensus continues. But given that this is an urgent question that has been granted today, I think we need to turn our attention to what can be done in the very immediate future to try to address the situation. Has the government been able to make any assessment of the possible implications of the execution for the North Korean leadership and for the wider region? And particularly if I can ask about discussions with China. I know the Minister mentioned that discussions have already taken place with the USA and with the Republic of Korea, but has any conversation taken place with Chinese officials yet, or will they do so in the near future? It has been reported that Yang Song-tech had been building trade links with China, prompting some speculation as to a change in economic policy. Can the Minister provide his assessment of such reports and of what North Korea's current relationship with China is like? I was in the Republic of Korea earlier this year, and my understanding is that the relationship is under some strain now. Was North Korea discussed during the Prime Minister's recent visit to China? More generally, can the Minister elaborate on what potential influence he thinks China can exercise? Given the UK and China have both recently been elected to the Human Rights Council, what action does the Minister think that the UN Human Rights Council can take? And most crucially, what does he think are the prospects for any response at all from North Korea? As the Minister mentioned, the UN Commission of Inquiry into Human Rights in North Korea is due to report in March. Can the Minister provide an indication of what recommendations the government would like to see the Commission make? And finally, given the unanimous support for UN security resolutions as has already been mentioned, will he be taking this up with the UN Security Council, and what does he think can be achieved by doing so?
The Honourable Lady, and I thank her for the spirit of consensus in which she framed her questions, because clearly we are very much on the same page of this. She made an assertion about the implication or the reasons for the execution. I would just pause to think about that. There is a total lack of clarity as to what this execution was about, and indeed there's an equal lack of clarity as to the implications for what happens next. I've read a number of reports this morning, and each really is just a speculative report. The answer is we don't know. Whether we will ever know is also a legitimate question, but as things stand, we just simply do not know. The Honourable Lady asked if this had been raised in China by the Prime Minister on our recent visit. I was with him in China. The answer is yes, it was. Equally, it was raised during the visit, as she would imagine, of President Park of the Republic of Korea, South Korea, on her recent state visit. She asked what more China can do. Well, of course, China, with a 900-mile border with North Korea, has a very real and present interest in it, and we believe China has a key role to play in the future of that country. But again, she asked what kind of relationship the current regime have with China, and that is something that we simply do not know, because we do not understand the thinking behind the leadership as it stands. The Honourable Lady asked again about the issue of the United Nations report. She asked me what the British government would like from the Commission of Inquiry. Well, the inquiry will report to the United Nations in March 2014. It would therefore be, as she will understand, inappropriate for us to comment on the recommendations before we've seen the full report. I believe that the unanimity shown by the United Nations Human Rights Council and its reporting will be extremely important in what we do next. Equally, we would like the six-party talks to resume as soon as possible, but at the moment, I have to say to the Honourable Lady, I cannot see them resuming until we have some sort of gesture of goodwill from the regime in Pyongyang, such a gesture would be more than welcome. Such a gesture, as she will be and the House will be aware, is very much absent.
Order. A great many honourable and right honourable members are seeking to catch my eye, but I must emphasise to the House that the second reading debate on the Care Bill, which is to follow, is very heavily subscribed, and therefore we are somewhat time-constrained, rendering pithiness from back and front benches alike imperative. Sir John Stanley.
As the United Kingdom remains a member of the Armistice Commission that was established at the end of the Korean War, can my right honourable friend give the House an unequivocal assurance that in the event of further military provocations from the north and a military response from the south, the United Kingdom government will use its position as a member of the Armistice Commission to do its utmost to ensure that a military response by both sides does not escalate out of control?
Well, my right honourable friend is talking about a military response. We very much are doing everything we possibly can within our power to avoid any form of regional instability or military response by any side in the region. There are a number of worrying areas in that part of the world. DPRK is contributing to the general instability. We work closely with our partners in the six-party talks. We liaise closely with both the Republic of Korea and with our American allies, and that we shall continue to do.
Gisela Stewart.
Will the Minister have slightly more robust conversations with the BBC, encourage them to look into the issue of transmitters into North Korea, and point out to them that BBC documentaries and drama, however entertaining they may be, are not really the answer to the question? It's the World Service and access which is what's needed.
Well, we do have these discussions. The Honourable Lady will no doubt be aware with the BBC, and as I say, my noble friend Lord Alton of Liverpool has really been leading on this. The BBC have taken a view on this. They're communicating that view to Lord Alton, and there are reasons for doing it. Equally, there are reasons not for doing it. At the end of the day, the BBC has that independence to decide where and to whom it will broadcast.
Sir Mingus Campbell.
I share all the expressions of distaste, even disgust, that we've heard already. But I wonder if I might be forgiven for saying we have to keep some sense of realism here. Isn't the truth that the best we can hope for the foreseeable future is to pursue successfully a policy of containment and deterrence?
Well, my right honourable friend speaks with considerable wisdom, and he is entirely right. Yes, containment is important, but equally we want to see the DPRK halt its programme trying to develop nuclear capability in violation of every known international agreement. That is what it is about. We do not want North Korea to become a nuclear state. We cannot act unilaterally to prevent it. We can act together with our partners in the six-party talks.
Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
Speaker, I share the Minister's horror at the execution that took place last week, and I condemn the death penalty in any circumstances anywhere, but it has served to highlight the abuse of human rights throughout North Korea. Would he say, if the six-party talks have at any stage included a discussion about human rights, and when they're resumed, if he will ensure that they are brought into the equation?
It is almost impossible to conceive any discussion involving the abuses of the regime, by the regime in Pyongyang, not including in part a discussion about their horrific abuse of human rights. As I said during my opening remarks, Mr. Speaker, perhaps the worst abuses currently of any regime, by any regime anywhere in the world.
Mr. Geoffrey Clifton Brown.
Yes. Would my right honourable friend not agree that the best way to start to break down the barriers in North Korea is by any possible contact with the outside world? Therefore, would he use his position to encourage contacts with South Korea in Kaesong? Would he encourage the BBC to consider broadcasting into North Korea? It's not a cost-effective decision, it's a diplomatic decision. And would he encourage the maximum contacts with China through trade?
Well, yes to the last point. I've just accompanied the Prime Minister on the largest ever Prime Ministerial-led trade delegation to go anywhere at any time with over 150 countries to China, so UK, Chinese bilateral trade is incredibly important. The BBC issue, I believe, I have addressed. His other point, that's why we have an embassy in Pyongyang. Some people say, if you can't penetrate what is going on in the minds of the regime, why do you have an embassy in Pyongyang? Well, the Honourable Gentleman's answered that question, because a chink of light is better than no light at all. The fact that we have diplomatic presence in North Korea is welcomed both by Seoul and by Washington, with whom we work very closely on these matters. It is important that whenever we see a chink of light, we can try and widen that light to really expose to the people of North Korea that there is a better world out there, and I do not believe that the regime can keep them downtrodden forever.
Mr. Gavin Shuker.
Extremely grateful, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if the Minister might be able to lay out his thinking around the parallel process to the six-party talks and the other avenues that the Foreign Office are pursuing in trying to resolve this issue.
The correct place to resume negotiations is with the six-party talks. That is absolutely key. That brings in all the interested parties in the region and the United States, obviously. Without the six-party talks, I do not believe sufficient progress can be made. And as I said earlier, I do not believe that it is possible for those six-party talks to resume without a gesture from the North Koreans. And that gesture, as I've already said, is currently, obviously, sadly lacking.
Mr. Andrew Selous.
We do already send food aid to some pretty unpalatable regimes around the world. Could we ask DFID to have a look again at the issue of North Korea?
I did say to my honourable friend that the situation is currently under review, and I will certainly raise this again with colleagues in DFID. I think there are issues as to why we do not give food aid to North Korea, not least because the very great difficulties there would be in ensuring that it ended up in the right place. But I commit to the honourable gentleman, who takes a keen interest, and rightly so, in these matters, to speaking to my DFID colleagues on this matter, and I shall get back to him on it.
Mr. Kevin Brennan.
Mr. Speaker, it's difficult to envisage any people anywhere in the world that wouldn't benefit more greatly from the BBC World Service than the people of North Korea. He said in his previous answer to my honourable friend for Birmingham Edgbaston there were reasons why the BBC had decided not to broadcast into North Korea. Will he share those reasons now with the House?
The BBC takes a view as to where its resources are best employed, where people can have best access to its broadcasting abilities, and at the end of the day, whatever representations we make to them, they quite properly make the final decision as to where they want to broadcast. That is how the BBC is enshrined in Charter. That is how it should remain.
Sir Tony Baldry.
Recent events in North Korea, doesn't it demonstrate the need for a clear, continuous and candid dialogue between the Foreign Office and the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs? And would my right honourable friend agree that the Prime Minister's recent visit to China was extremely welcome in thickening and deepening the UK's relations with China?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I was really encouraged by the levels of access that the Prime Minister and the ministerial team with him were granted by the Chinese authorities. I think political and diplomatic relations are now good. Bilateral trade is, of course, extremely good. Inward investment is good. And it is absolutely critical, as he says, that China continue to play a lead role in trying to resolve what has been for many, many decades now an almost an impenetrable problem, and that problem being a despotic regime, a rogue despotic regime treading on the lives of its people. It cannot go on indefinitely. It is up to all of us in the international community, not only for to prevent some of the regional instability created by this situation, but also for the people who are living there in the most horrific circumstances.
Jim Shannon.
The 20% of North Korea's Christians are in jail. What discussions did the Prime Minister have on his economic visit to China recently to lean upon North Korea to ask for a relaxation or an easement of persecution of Christians?
The honourable gentleman is right. He always speaks up for Christians. Alas, it is not only the Christian community in North Korea who are so downtrodden. We raised our general concerns about this and human rights in North Korea with officials from the North Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs most recently in November 2013. But I have to tell the honourable gentleman, significant progress on human rights is difficult to make, and protection of minorities such as Christians is difficult to ensure because the North Korean government refuses to enter into meaningful discussions on these matters.
Robert Buckland.
Mr. Speaker, what assessment does my right honourable friend make of reports of widespread public indoctrination sessions occurring in North Korea? Don't they reinforce the point that greater outside influence must be brought to bear if we are to see change in this despicable regime and change for the people of North Korea?
Well, my honourable friend, who I know has a meeting, I think, of the Conservative group on North Korea on tomorrow, will know that I wish to discuss this. He talks about this kind of sort of indoctrination. I have to say that it is almost surreal, the levels of indoctrination that go on. It is incomparable, really, to any other regime or any other country in the world. It is horrific, and almost every aspect of their lives is a result of indoctrination. And, of course, that's why we maintain an embassy, as I said earlier. That's why any chink of light is better than no light at all. But it's a long haul and it's difficult work.
Tobias Elwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister will be aware that there are many North Koreans in touch with families in South Korea, and they have reported not just indoctrination sessions have indeed increased, but also targeted individuals are being forced to write letters of loyalty to the leader Kim Jong-un. Does this not suggest that Chang's execution is in fact part of a wider campaign to consolidate power in the light of the fact that the economy continues to fail?
Well, indeed, there are reports that he has taken the blame for the desperate state of the economy. There are reports that this is the work of the military and not of the leader. But all these, Mr. Speaker, are just that. They are reports. We could indulge ourselves all afternoon by speculating as to the reasons behind this. The answer is we do not know. The one fact of which we are certain is that the people of North Korea are suffering in a way that only some of us can guess at, and some of us would not wish that treatment to be vested on even our worst enemies.
Philip Hollowbone.
Is North Korea sharing nuclear weapons technology with Iran?
We remain extremely concerned about proliferation of any sort. There has been evidence in the past of trade between North Korea and Iran, which is why it is so vital that everybody adheres to the sanctions regime which is currently imposed.
Order.